Welcome back, everyone. I hope you all had a good lunch. This afternoon, we will continue our conversation on Redesign ASEAN. Start with a panel discussion on redesigning ASEAN by people, to be moderated by Sophea Chrek from Social Action for Community and Development, SACD in Cambodia. May I invite Sophea Chrek on screen, please?
Hello.
Hello and welcome.
Hi.
Sophea Chrek, hello. Sophea Chrek is a female activist, researcher, campaigner who has been involved in socio-political and economic justice work and campaigning for more than 10 years. Currently, she is the coordinator of Social Action for Community and Development, Cambodia. Kun Sophia, please take the floor.
Thank you, Sayan Susay, and good afternoon. My name is Sophea, and I will be moderating this panel discussion, Redesigning Mekong-ASEAN by People. So for this panel discussion, we will join by 4 profound panelists, and let me introduce you to them. So first panelist is Charles Santiago. Santiago is a Malaysian parliamentarian and the chairperson of ASEAN Parliamentarians for Human Rights. He is a member of Democratic Action Party coalition. Santiago was first elected to parliament in 2008 election. Prior to his election, Santiago was an economist and worked for non-governmental organizations, such as the Coalition Against Water Privatization and Monitoring Sustainability of Globalization Malaysia. Santiago is also known and respected for his firm stand to defend the rights of refugees, political prisoners, and dissent across Southeast Asian region. Our second panelist is Khaingmin Lwin Tee. He is a migrant field officer of RakThai Foundation. He is working on migrant worker health programs such as TB, HIV/AIDS, and COVID-19. He is a young, passionate activist who has been working to promote the rights of migrant workers in Thailand over the last 10 years. He is originally from Rakhine state of Burma, Myanmar. And our third panelist is Sreymom Loem is a labor and women's activist and is working with Worker Information Center. Prior to her roles at WIC, Loem was among the girls who left her hometown to seek employment in the garment factory and had experienced labor exploitation, poor wage, and social discrimination. She worked in garment factory for 6 years. Loem has joined a number of campaigns led by women workers to claim their rights to just compensation, improve living conditions of garment workers in Cambodia, and also to promote women's rights and leadership in their workplaces. Last but not least, our fourth panelist is Dr. Supat Hasuwannakit. Dr. Hasuwannakit is a director of Chana District Hospital in Songkla in southern part of Thailand. Dr. Hasuwannakit is also the current chief of the Rural Doctor Society, RDS. RDS is a health worker base with a strong reputation of upholding justice, equalities, and good governance, while battling corruption and standing by people in time of crisis. Equally important, Dr. Hasuwannakit has led and been implementing the solar clean energy, and this project has been implemented at his hospital. But before I hand this first panel discussion to Santiago, let me provide a few housekeeping notes for you information. So this panel discussion is live streaming on the channel, and in case you have questions, please do write it on the channel chat box that you're on. You can write your question in your language. We will make sure that your question be translated into English and passed to the panelists. Without any further delay, I'd like to invite Charles Santiago to provide his insights of the ASEAN people demands, but also the way forward. Charles, the floor is yours.
Turn off
Please
the
turn on
microphone, please.
your microphone, please.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Clap, clap.
Yep.
Can you hear? Yeah. Thanks, Sophia, for the kind introduction. Let me just begin by extending my greetings of peace and solidarity to all our speakers, as well as friends who are watching this program, who are part of this program in different parts of Southeast Asia. My name is Charles Santiago, as introduced, and I'm the chairperson of the ASEAN Parliamentarians for Human Rights at this time. I've been asked to speak on two sets of questions. The first question is, what are the major needs of the ASEAN people today? And then the second question is, how do we redesign ASEAN in terms of people's voices? How do we redesign them? So I think to answer the first question, I think one of the biggest issues facing ASEAN today, the people of ASEAN today, is the economic inequality in our society. In all our countries, in all our 10 countries, we have a major problem of inequality, something that has been brought into sharp focus by the COVID-19 pandemic and the subsequent economic recession. For a start, the pandemic has had a disproportionate impact on vulnerable groups. In fact, one can say, and let's be clear, that one of the communities that are worst affected are the poor, and especially people in the informal sector and small businesses. These are people who have been affected quite horribly by the pandemic. And also, notably, refugees and migrants, as well as workers in the informal economy. Many of these people have been pushed deeper into poverty as a result, and unemployment by the health crisis. For example, in Thailand, in my own country, Malaysia, migrants have been disproportionately affected with widespread infections found among migrant workers, worker communities, due to overcrowded and unhygienic living conditions that have increased the risk of COVID-19 spreading. In fact, refugees as well as migrants in detention centers also face a similar problem of unhygienic migrant detention conditions. In addition, migrant workers lose their jobs or incomes. Some are facing shortages of food and clean drinking water, not to mention discriminatory obstacles in receiving medical treatment and assistance from governments. Now, this you can also extend to local people as well, where in the case of Malaysia, we have thousands of families today, even till today, who are having difficulty putting food on the table, as a result of loss of jobs, loss of income, and there's no promise of any support for them by the government. In some countries, including my own country, Malaysia, governments have used the pandemic as an excuse to scapegoat refugees and migrants as part of efforts to distract from their own failings in effectively tackling the pandemic. This inequality we are witnessing in our region is also heavily linked to one of the most pressing issues of our time, both in Southeast Asia and globally, the climate crisis. This is a second issue that I think faces a lot of us in Southeast Asia. And Southeast Asia is regarded as one of the world's most risk regions. This is risk regions by the United Nations from the impact of climate change. And time is quickly running out for drastic action to be taken that will reverse the course. It's certainly something that the people of the region have recognized as a priority. Although COVID-19 has dominated much of the public discussion and discourse for the past year or so, most people in Southeast Asia view COVID-19 and the climate crisis as an equal priority, though. So this is something that we have to keep as activists. We have to keep in mind that the climate crisis and the COVID crisis should be seen in terms of equal priority for governments and also for the work that we do. That's according to a study published late last year by ICA out of Singapore. According to the study, climate change is viewed as a current crisis by much of ASEAN's population. Respondents to the study said the national governments, followed by individuals and businesses and industry, should be those most responsible for tackling climate change. There was also a high level of engagement on climate-related advocacy, particularly from youths in Southeast Asia, indicating a passion to tackle the issues. The study found that more than 50% of respondents, youths under the age of 21, are involved in leading a project mobilizing support or attending environment or environmentally related seminars. This is something that you can see going forward. The leaders of our region have also recognized the importance of tackling environmental issues, and in their own ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework, Southeast Asia governments recognize that climate change represents a fundamental risk to ASEAN, and that actions to mitigate the impacts of climate change should be taken urgently and immediately. This is an issue that has attracted considerable attention, particularly as part of efforts to keep global temperature below 1.5 degrees Celsius and ahead of the Global Climate Change Conference COP26, which will begin in Scotland in late October. In fact, the ASEAN Parliamentarians for Human Rights, this is something that we've been looking closely at, and this afternoon we'll release a report, Building Back Better, looking at how countries in Southeast Asia can shift towards a greener economy after COVID-19. We must do everything we can to introduce policies and measures that breaks away from problematic practices of the past and move towards a just and sustainable economy, and one that protects the rights and creates equal opportunities for all. As representatives of the people, us lawmakers lie at the heart of fulfilling climate change commitments, whether that's through our role in pushing progressive legislation, overseeing the national budget, or in our mandate to voice our constituents who will be the most affected by climate change if no action is taken. Earlier this year, I was also heavily involved in the launch of the Parliamentarians' call for a fossil fuel-free future, a global project that is calling for MPs to contribute to efforts towards a transition away from coal, oil, and gas. Moving away from coal, oil, and gas. The reason myself and my fellow colleagues feel so passionately about this topic is because time is running out to act. The scientific consensus is clear that human activities are the main cause of climate change, which is one of the gravest threats to the natural environment, human rights, and peace. The effects of climate change are being felt every day and have already led to devastating consequences on people's lives. Not only do they exacerbate the spread of disease, but also threaten societal issues, serious issues such as food security and key infrastructure, and if left unchecked, will push millions more people into poverty, hunger, and displacement. Our leaders in the region have so far failed on the issues of inequality and climate change, not to mention other crucial issues impacting our region. One of those that is clearly on the rise is authoritarianism in the region, where countries including Cambodia, the Philippines, Thailand, and Myanmar have all witnessed worrying backslides in terms of democratic freedoms in recent years. Many of these oppressive governments have in fact used COVID-19 pandemic to introduce harsher measures that restrict people's fundamental rights, such as freedom of assembly or speech. Leaders elsewhere in the region, particularly ASEAN as a bloc, have shown themselves essentially useless in terms of pushing back against these worrying trends. I think a good example of that is what's happening in Myanmar. I've said it before, and I will say it again, that ASEAN is today little more than a rich man's club. Let me say that again, though, a little more than a rich man's club. And its already poor reputation has taken a further blow this year with an inability to act on the crisis taking place in Myanmar. ASEAN failed to stand on the side of Myanmar people when they needed them most. But when this region lacks in terms of leadership from our governments, it more than makes up for with the strength of civil society groups such as ours who are part of this program. And we must do everything in our power to uplift the voices who are working for advancement and improvements in our societies. This includes doing everything we can to bring different voices together and learn from each other, as well as being inclusive as possible in our efforts to ensure that as many people, different perspectives as possible, are heard, particularly those from groups who are often sidelined in discussions. Now, to answer the second question, and I'll answer some of the second part of the second question, which was how do you redesign ASEAN from a people's standpoint? How do you redesign? I think we go back to the ASEAN Charter. The ASEAN Charter is quite clear to its commitment to rule of law, its commitment to human rights, to its commitment on democracy, as well as good governance. It is clear that none of the countries in the region, except maybe one or two, try as much as possible to fulfill all of the four: rule of law, good governance, human rights, and democracy. And I think this is where we are lacking. So if we want to redesign ASEAN, we should look at one to upgrade in the level of priority of human rights and democracy, good governance, and rule of law. I think these are some things that we really have to keep in mind, besides the idea that climate change is also quite important in the way we live. ASEAN governments are very quiet, in fact, play a very limited role in their own countries in terms of addressing climate crises. Even after the UN's warning that Southeast Asia is a spotlight, it could be in the receiving end of climate change, but nothing much is being done at a serious level. Now, I also like to say that another development that we see happening in the region, especially with the COVID crisis, is lack of social protection for ordinary people, both in the formal sector as well as in the informal sector. Governments, for the most part, are focusing on the formal sector, but we have to look at the informal sector as part of rolling out social protection for people. Now, this is quite important because sometimes the informal sector, in the case of Malaysia, it's about 4.9 million people. And right now, they have no support. The formal sector does not get any support. Most of the support goes to the formal sector. Even that is not very much, but still there is some support for the formal sector, but not for the informal sector. And I'm sure that is what you see in other countries as well, especially in the less developing countries. So I think we need some kind of a workers' security, insurance security for informal sector workers, and for in those countries where there is no social security for workers' insurance security, we need to put that we need to keep that in mind as we go forward. I think these are some of the things that we need to keep in mind, because at the end of the day, as it seems right now, most of the region, unemployment is quite high. People are finding it difficult to put food on the table, as I mentioned earlier. So governments have to step up. Governments have to step up and actually rethink their role in government, rethink about their commitment to human rights, especially one that they signed in the ASEAN context. Most of them in all of ASEAN have got very nice documents that they have signed in the ASEAN level. But when it comes to implementation in their own countries, it is really, really behind. It's really, really behind, and it's completely undemocratic, and human rights is thrown to the garbage bin. So I think the work that we have to do is much, but I would like to say that in redesigning, in looking forward, I think some of the things that we have to look at is the issue of rule of law, human rights, good governance, democracy, which are already in ASEAN Charter. I think we need to push governments to honor what they have already signed. I think that's one. And then to look at the issue of climate change. The other issue is the issue of social protection for both formal workers and also informal sector. I think this is the way forward. Ideas such as job guarantees can be put forward. Ideas such as insurance scheme for informal sector workers should also be considered as part of redesigning ASEAN, relooking at ASEAN going forward. I will stop here. I'm sorry, I have to leave after this because I need to go back to the chamber for a debate, and that starts at 2:30. So, Sophia, I really apologize and apologize to other friends. I can't join you for the Q&A, but thanks for the kind invitation, and I hope to catch up with you folks at some point in time. Thank you very much. And
thank you, Santiago, for your comprehensive sharings, and it's very important for this time of crisis. Well, he has provided us broader strokes of what's happening, especially with regard to these economic inequalities, the impact that has been seen and reflects on the small-scale investors and also on the worker. He has also mentioned about the emergencies of the action that the government of ASEAN need to respond in terms of this time of climate crisis. And there's this alert warning from the United Nations to the ASEAN government that ASEAN will be the region that face this tremendous impact He also provides this alternative which draw from this observation on youth movement, youth participation in addressing, voicing out the issue around climate justice and climate change. And he's also provides us this insightful recommendation on this need to fulfill this commitment and political will of the government in terms of human rights, democracies, and good governance. He's also provide us this recommendation that the ASEAN government in designing this nation to a better world, they have to act now to address the climate crisis and moving out from this dirty energy and the destruct way of economic. He also provides us this issue of social insurance and insurance for workers in both formal and informal economic sector. So I would like to invite our second panelist who will be speaking on this issue of the migrant worker in Thailand experience during the COVID-19, but he also will provide us this perspective, insights of what redesigning ASEAN means to migrants worker. So Khaingmin Lwin Tee, I'd like to invite you to this session. Please, you have 15 minutes. Thank you.
ขอบคุณครับ ขออนุญาตใช้สไลด์นะครับสไลด์
ให้เราเปิดให้ใช่ไหมคะ
เดี๋ยวผมเปิด
You want us to do it for you, or I can do it myself? Thank you.
เห็นหรือยังครับ
Can you see it now?
Yep.
เห็นแล้วค่ะ
ครับสวัสดีครับ
Good afternoon. My name is Khaingmin Lwin Tee. มาจากรัฐยะไข่ I come from Arakan state in Myanmar, and I have been working with RakThai Foundation, working with migrant workers from Myanmar, Laos, and Cambodia. And I would like to present to you today what I think is would be useful, that is about migrant workers in Thailand during the COVID-19 situation. So if we talk about migrant workers, we need to talk about what happened before COVID-19. Migrant workers coming to work in Thailand had to pay a lot of fees and had a lot of costs before they can actually enter employment legally. The costs, the travel costs, the broker's fees and visa fees and all that, they had to bear the burden of all the costs, and the procedure is also very difficult. They cannot do it themselves. They have to rely on brokers or the recruiting agencies to help them. That made them vulnerable from the beginning. And next, on how to access social workers protection or labor protection. But there's a problem with communicating with the state agencies, and all the documents are in Thai. So the interpreters hired by the government are not sufficient to help everyone. And when migrant workers come to live in Thailand to work anywhere, if they don't have sufficient earnings, income, they would like to change employers, but there is a condition that prevents workers from changing employers, then there is the time frame. You had to find a new employer within 30 days. So it's very difficult for workers to find a new employer in time. And also the other conditions involved, proving that the employers, the current employers, are not fulfilling their agreements. Otherwise, their work permit will be revoked. So that means that they become illegal in the country. And if they are illegal residents in the country, then they have no way, no power, no bargaining power. And migrant workers cannot form unions. They cannot access collective bargaining or joining trade unions of their own. When the COVID-19 situation arrived, the first thing that happened to them was the loss of their jobs. They were dismissed. Now about 700,000 migrant workers are out of job because the construction camps were closed and some of the restaurants or the places where they work are closed, including factories. Then if they are hired by the contractors, then the employer will return them to the contractors, and that means that they would have no income. They would just be waiting for reassignment. And another problem is that because there is no overtime payment for them, and then the wages may be reduced, and then the time working time is also reduced. And with these closure, the temporary closures of businesses has affected all the workers. And for Thai workers, though, the state, the government has provided some kind of protection, but only this social protection is also only for Thai nationals. That is clearly stated. So the migrant workers cannot access any assistance at all. And while the lockdown was going on, people were supposed to work from home, but for migrant workers, they had problems in communicating in Thai already. So there are more obstacles for them to be able to work from home. And in summary, for migrant workers during the COVID situations, they have no access to assistance, social assistance, social protection, and they don't have access to medical care if they are infected with COVID. They cannot join any of the temporary shelters because sometimes they have a sign outside these quarantine places or field hospitals saying no migrant workers can be admitted. So also they cannot actually in the area, they may have other necessities, but they cannot communicate their needs. But right now, because they don't have income, because being dismissed from their jobs, they don't have actually money to pay for phone calls to try to access all the hotlines that have been opened for migrant workers. So until now, the migrant workers, they are stigmatized in Thai society as being the source of COVID-19 infection and the spread of the virus. So that this caused more problems for them in going anywhere. So they are in a stressful situation while they're under quarantine or being treated in anywhere. But when they don't have any income, definitely they have living problems while during quarantine. They don't have enough food to eat. But once they are COVID free, then they're chased out of their places. And so migrant workers who used to be legal workers was forced out and then become illegal workers during the COVID situation. And then in terms of medical treatment and that for COVID-19, they only have themselves to rely on to get some kind of medicine. And another issue is the legal status of migrant workers. That means they have to have the proper documents, but they might had it before, but now they don't anymore. So during this lockdown and the government officials working from home, they cannot do anything. They cannot change employers. They cannot apply for the extension of their work permit, or even to extend their visa. And if their passports are already expired, then they are without passport, without legal documents. They become totally illegal entities. So the future for migrant workers, we don't know what it will look like. We don't have any ways to do any bargaining, and the migrant workers cannot organize their own unions, and they cannot demand any assistance from the employers because they lack that right. But sometimes maybe they can do negotiate, but of course it's very difficult to ensure that the employers follow through with the promises. So the problems keeps growing, and the workers have no tools to resolve their situations. If they gather together and form a group, they become illegal. So they don't have a legal status to do collective bargaining, and they have no power at all. So they try to solve their own problems, but they don't. Their attempt has not been recognized or respected. So we need to address these issues of migrant workers together with redesigning ASEAN. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tees, for your insightful sharing. But it's also the issue which we continue to hear of this exploitation, this issue of this exclusions of migrant workers. Well, I would not repeat what Tees has just shared with us. So I would just move to our next panelist, Sreymom. So Sreymom will share with us also the situation of the garment factory worker in Cambodia before and also during the COVID-19, and also the response of labor movement here in Cambodia to the issue. Sreymom, please keep your presentation up to 15 minutes, and just please take the floor.
Can you stop sharing your screen, please?
Oh, okay. Yeah. Lư bà, nhầm lư. For this afternoon, I will show you some issues and problems faced by workers in Cambodia before and during the spread of COVID-19. Next slide, please. In the textile and footwear industry in Cambodia in 2019, there are 1,153 factories with around 840,000 workers. Mostly are women. These women are migrants migrants from different provinces for work in the cities. Also, garment sector is very important. It remains the backbone of the national economy. 75% of the total export products come from the garment sector. The products manufactured and exported to they are exported to Europe, USA, Canada, Japan, and China. And in 2020, workers' wages are only $190 per month. Investors operating in Cambodia are from China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, United Kingdom, Japan, Malaysia, Singapore, and Korea. These products are being distributed to those large markets in these countries. The production chain of these products are involved with new brands, H&M, M&S, Adidas, Gap, Onavi, and Manigo, Salomon, and so on and so forth. However, I want to say that while we export products produced by our workers, they are part of our national economy. What is the working condition of our workers? Now I'm going to present to you about the situation of our workers' economy. These figures I'm presenting to you are derived from research on the truth of the national economic backbone and the Ministry of labor and vocational training, and the impacts on the workers in the garment sector. Workers face very difficult working conditions. Workers' rights are not respected and protected. Managers or management of production line are Chinese. They manage the whole production chain. 80%, next slide please, 80% of the production in garment factories are based on short-term employment contracts. When it is time for the employment contract, the owners are discharged from legal responsibility before the law. Before the COVID-19 situation, they had our workers had difficult working conditions, but during the COVID-19, 180 garment factories were suspended, and these 180 factories are composed of 150,000 workers. They have lost their job. Some have job suspensions. They have no access to benefits. They have lost income. They need to find new job, and so on and so forth. While big companies suspend their activities and operations, there are subcontractors increasing. Next slide, please. And they put the banners to show they are recruiting workers, while the subcontractors use the materials from the big factories to produce the products for the big factories for a production change. However, workers work at least 50 hours per week for the bigger or larger factories. The handicraft workers recruit and engage more workers in the employment. Through our survey, large factories provide shirts or unfinished products to the subcontracting factories, and the workers in these factories have difficulty and lose their benefits. For example, they lose the access to National Social Security Fund. They do not get it. They work less days. They are paid on a daily basis. If they do not go to work, they would not be paid. For living conditions, those who produce for big brands are difficult. They live in rented room in small size. The rent fee is 25 US dollar, and the room they live in is hot, no ventilation. Usually and frequently they are sick. Their working and living environment causes health problems and risk to them. So 60% of our respondents said they are sick. 64% said they were sick, and they often went to private clinics near their rented house or rented room. Usually they spend their out-of-pocket money. They spend between 5 to 25 US dollar for medical treatment when they go to have health checkup at a private clinic. However, in their living space, 50.7% of them said they experienced having their room broken, so it is not safe in their rented room. Usually this happens during the daytime. When they come back from work, they experience this, and up to 50.7% of them experience this. During the spread of COVID-19, 88.4% said their daily expense are growing up while their income has been low, and they have lost their job or they have been laid off, and the most challenges include expenses on house rent, electricity, water, and food. Most workers use privately supplied water, which is costly. So, but the government supply water is cheaper, but the water price is higher if it is provided by the private sector. And now I would like to tell you who Women's Workers Center and how women how do they face their challenges. For Cambodian Women's Information Center, we for Cambodian Workers Information Center, we work on our workers who face exploitation and injustice. So we organize them in their areas where they live to empower them. We want to advocate for respect for workers' rights. How we do our work is we have our drop-in center for workers to discuss about their working conditions, living conditions, and other worker-related issues. We want them to discuss about the situation they are facing. We want to ensure they discuss. We want them to have confidence in their leadership at both their workplace and at their living area. We want them to expose their issues to the public. We want them to access justice and social justice and social services provided by the states. However, during the lockdown due to the spread of COVID-19 in April and May 2021, a lot of infection occurred in the area where our workers live. They have faced a lot of serious problems. They did not have income, and the support from the government is limited. They cannot leave home to go to work. They were stressful. They lost income. They have no money to send to their children and back home to the village. They have no money to cover daily expenses for food and to repay loan and debt. However, in this, even though this sector is very important, the government response and attention to this sector is limited. The government focus their attention on investors instead. For example, during the spread of the COVID-19, we asked for work suspension, but the government asked those factories involved to provide 50% of their wage. But later, employers said they could not afford to pay workers that much. They could afford to pay only 60%, and 60% the employers pay 40% and the government pay 20%, but they were paid $70 per month during the suspension, but the payment is not made in time to address the problems that our workers faced. Recently, we have heard a decision on promoting a wage to $194 per month for worker. This is my brief presentation. I look forward to further discussion. If you have questions or comments, thank you.
Thank you, Sreymom. I would not provide the summaries of what is said, so I will just move to our last but not least, Dr. Supat. Dr. Supat will provide us this insight of what is happening with Thai health system in this crisis of COVID-19, but he will also provide us this way forward and alternative, what one's health ASEAN or health system in Thailand can be improved to ensure this access of the people. Dr. Supat, you have 15 minutes and the floor is yours.
Thank you everyone สวัสดีทุกคนนะครับก็นานๆนะที่ผมจะมีโอกาสเข้า
Thank you everyone. It's rare that I get to join an international seminar like today. It's a big question what you asked about how ASEAN can become one health. Is it possible? ASEAN is not one yet. So, and the chance for ASEAN to become one is also rare. So it's just sweet words that have not become reality, cannot become reality. But during the COVID situation, every country is facing the same situation. So it's interesting that COVID-19 could be one of the factor, the driving factor to push people to look after each other better in terms of their health. I just thought that this would be good to look at. But if you look at in August, Cambodia had actually vaccinated quite a big number of people. But the Hun Sen government in August said that Cambodia will donate the COVID vaccines to Cambodian workers in the Thailand border, within the Thailand border, which is in terms of tens of thousands of people. So the reaction from the Thai government, they said, no, don't want, they don't want to lose face maybe. And so basically, we need to pressure the government. Now, if you don't receive the vaccines from Cambodia, how will the Cambodian workers get vaccinated? Because Thailand is put the Thai nationals first. They announced that. So, and the Thai people also are going along with the government. So, but in the end, they just said no to the Cambodian government. And then in September, the Thai government came out to say, okay, we'll take it on the 11th of September. And now it's 30th of September. I don't know whether the Cambodian workers have been vaccinated yet. On the Thai side, that is, I just wonder. This is a clear example that there is no one health in ASEAN. In Thailand or in ASEAN, we have not yet reached that. In the mind of ASEAN, about this oneness, we have not yet actually arrived there at the oneness that we were talking about. Then along the Myanmar and Thai border as well, the situation is the same. The Myanmar people came to the Thai side to get treatment in Tak province, Mae Hong Son province, and usually the Thai government hospitals, they actually accept those people who cross over. But then when COVID-19 occurred, they're starting to have doubts, to have questions whether are you infected with COVID or not. So it seems that there is less generosity, more worry about the COVID-19 spread. And in fact, the people on either side of the border are related anyways. And if they come over on the Thai side, then it becomes the burden of the Thai hospitals. But if you're going to have a good faith of looking at the ASEAN people as one, then the Thai government should offer treatment to the Myanmar people, but not leaving the burden on the individual hospitals. They should also provide to help for those hospitals along the border, but they haven't. So that means that we have not yet gone very far in mutual assistance in terms of public health. But maybe there are more cooperations along other borders. I don't know, but that was a COVID situation. But if you talk about One Health, it's not just COVID, because health is not about disease, about communicable disease. It's about everything. For example, the biggest problem that ASEAN is facing is haze. Haze that occurs in the north of Thailand, north of ASEAN, Myanmar, Thai, Laos, Cambodia as well. There are burning of the fields and causing smokes and haze everywhere, spreading everywhere in the region. This is a common problem, but it seems there is not enough recognition of it as a common problem that needs to be solved. And for Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore on the south, the haze problem also is there. And they blamed it on the oil palm clearance of forest land for oil palm plantation. But it seems that being one among ASEAN people to try to resolve this problem is not there. The intention is not there yet. This means that our health is related to our environment. Good health means you have to have good environment. So in Hat Yai, in the south of Thailand, we also face problem of pollution in the cities, of haze. And we know that our health is being affected. And if you go farther north, what are we going to do with the Mekong River? It was dry yesterday, now it's full today. And what about the Salween River that is going to be built? That so many dams are going to be built upon the Salween River. It's probably the only river available now that is not yet dammed in Southeast Asia, and it's got probably the best large piece of forest area left there. But of course, dam building will cause people to migrate, to lose their land. Then they will become workers, unskilled workers in urban areas. But that is not the goal of the sustainable development at all. We can see the problems, all these problems that I mentioned at least, but what are we going to do as the people of ASEAN without state power? Another issue, it's kind of, it's really in our mind now, it's about the submarine that Thailand has just decided to buy a submarine. And when people said that this is the COVID situation is costing us a lot of money already, why are you using the money to buy the submarine? And they say, the government say Indonesia has it, Malaysia has it, so we have to have it too, you know. So I see this as it's like a waste of money, a waste of people's taxes. And then we should use the money to try to ensure universal health coverage or the proposed universal basic income for everyone. Yeah. But these are basic issues that all the peoples are dealing with. I think we have to work together to say that ASEAN will be submarine free. You know, the heavy weapon, the free, nuclear free, and war free. And we want peace. We wanted ASEAN to be the land of peace. And when that happens, then the budget, the government, the income that the government has can actually be channeled to help the people inclusively, much more inclusively. Yeah. And if we don't do it, One Health is not going to happen. If you look at health only concerning about the diseases like dengue or HIV/AIDS or COVID-19, these are only one dimension of health. Actually, health is related, your health, our health is related to the environment, to the river, to the air, and to the submarine. So far we have helped each other, not so much. When COVID was raging in Bangkok, I visited Bangkok and we talked to the migrant workers. They really could not access COVID screening. They could not get the COVID test at all. But once they know that they've got COVID, then there's a problem of finding a place so that they can get some treatment. So the migrant workers definitely are the most discriminated against in Thailand at the moment. So we need to send signals to each other among the NGOs and civil society groups that are working to campaign. We need to identify our common issues. The problem is that in Thailand, now the people, the civil society groups in Thailand are kind of weary about petitioning the Thai government We have submitted so many petitions, submitted letters, but no response. So we may need to focus more on communicating to society, to launch a campaign or to set examples, to do something to set examples for others. So if we don't want coal, then we can actually install solar cells on top of the hospitals to show people that it can be done. We can replace fossil fuel with clean energy. And I think the first thing, so One Health can will probably happen among the people first before all the 10 ASEAN governments get behind us. I think people power is the only way to go to reduce inequalities, to build solidarity, friendships, to reduce nationalism. No, because we're now in the height of nationalism in every country. Then that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Supat. I really like what you have said and how you're connecting the different thought of the issue. It's such enriched, broadened articulation. Thank you so much. Well, I have received one question for Sreymom, but I also have each question for you and also T. So I will read out this question for Sreymom. Recently, with this wage campaign of the labor movement in Cambodia with the Garment Manufacturer Association, the Association of the Employers, and the government, the tripartite, the decision was that the worker won't get a wage increase, but the Prime Minister decided to provide $2 US dollars in addition to the 190 US dollar per month. So from this, will these $2 addition, the intervention by the Prime Minister have to the garment worker in Cambodia? So that's for Sreymom and for Dr. Supat. So when you mentioned about this issue of this climate crisis and its interconnection to health, where it is not only itself just about disease, but also this interconnection. I really like to hear further of whether the state of crisis right now is due to this ongoing of liberalization of health service or the privatization of public services, well, of course, in relation to different economic dimension that is governments of Thailand, but also in Cambodia, but other in the region trying to promote this rapid economic growth. So from your perspective, is the liberalization and privatization of the public services also contribute to this challenge of redesigning ASEAN's One Health, or are there some other elements that cause this One Health, One ASEAN Health impossible? So this is for Dr. Supat. For T, what would be the ASEAN for the migrant worker look like the real ASEAN where migrant worker can work freely and are equally treated. So are there any recommendation or perspective from you, from your long-term experience working with migrant worker in Thailand? So, okay, I would like to give Sreymom first to respond to this, and then I will go to T, and Dr. Supat will be the last one. Is that okay?
Okay.
Okay. So Sreymom, please keep it short. We run out of time.
ចាអរគុណច្រើនសម្រាប់សំណួរដ៏មានសារៈសំខាន់របស់ពីក្មិន
Well, thank you very much for your important question. I will talk about talking about, as I told you in my presentation, the little increase of a little increase of our workers' wage is made, but exemptions for investors are a lot. I would like to tell you that having increased a little wage, I don't mean we have it increased of all a sudden. In 1996, there were two movements. We have the worker union for free trade unions of the Kingdom of Cambodia. And in 1997, there was a labor law. What I want to show is that in the law 1997, Article 4 and Article 9 mention about decent wage for workers in the government sector. However, if there is no labor movements to demand for wage increase, the wage would not increase, would not be increased. So the demands for female workers or workers in that sector was very strong. Many people have lost their life due to their movements. And in 1997, the wage was only $30 US. Now, in this 2021, because I don't know exactly what will happen next year, as you know. I don't know what happened. I cannot hear her. Excuse me, interpreter cannot hear the speaker. Mark nhâm sâm tốt. There's miền đạch phường đầu tiên này.
All black out now, so we are trying to shift to the mobile internet. Let me have her to Okay, so while Sreymom is trying to connect to the internet, can I just move to T? So please.
ครับสวัสดีอีกครั้งนะครับก็ผมคิดว่าของในอาเซียนนะครับก็
So good afternoon again. For workers in ASEAN, particular migrant workers in the ASEAN countries who want to come to work in either in Thailand or Malaysia, we need to have a decent wages in order to maintain a good enough living condition, and also we need safe travel. That means that we need to be protected. There is a law that protects workers from having to pay fees to the brokers, but of course in reality that doesn't happen very often. And also we need, as I said, it's about the quality of life of workers, and we need to focus on the right to organize their own organizations. That is very important for them. to be able
Thank
to
you,
negotiate.
Secretary. Dr. Supat, the floor is yours.
สวัสดีนะครับ
Yes, it's a difficult question. In fact, capitalist development is something we cannot get away from because the whole world is going this way. But of course, if you go on the extreme, meaning privatizing everything, even hospitals, schools, that these are basic social services provided by the state. They have done privatization of the energy and also waterworks. But privatization can be a means to increase efficiency. But I think the ideology of the organization is the most important thing. You can privatize an entity, a government enterprise like university, hospitals, the waterwork or power plants, but
Dr. Supat.
คุณหมอสุพัฒน์ but if you aim for create riches for the shareholders alone, that is not the way to go, because most all these are basic social services, and we should not use the basic social service to make money on. But of course, it seems that the people at the with power always aim for profit. And we know that this way forward is unsustainable and it cannot tackle the problems of climate change at all. I see though that the younger generation is different from the older generation. I think this happens in every country. Our new generation has become more liberal, more individualistic, but they are more international. They look at the whole world. They look at human rights more than the older generation. They look at the oneness of the world. And I think this way of thinking is going to lead to the better future, because more young people can speak English now. They can communicate better using the common language. They share the food, they share their different passions. So of course the future belongs to them, but the problem is the power, the political power now belongs to the older generation, and this is important. Look at Myanmar, look at Thailand, look at Cambodia. The leaders have been there forever. They don't allow new generation to come in. This is just some complaints, normal complaints from my feeling. I don't know if I answered the question. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't know I answered your question or not.
Thank you, Dr. Supat. Yes, you have, and you provide very critical aspect in this complex issue. Well, Sreymom want to add a few more lines to the question earlier. Sreymom, please go ahead. Sreymom.
អរគុណច្រើនសម្រាប់ដល់ពេលបាត់ឲ្យខ្ញុំសម្រាប់រយៈពេលក្នុងការឆ្លើយតបសំណួរអធិស្ឋានផងមិញព្រោះដាច់អ៊ីនធឺណិតខ្ញុំចង់ជំរាបអង្គដែរថាតកតងទៅនឹងលក្ខខណ្ឌដែលការទាមទារគឺចលនា
With regard to our demand, the movement has been continuing since 1996 and 1997, while the labor law 1997, Article 104 and 107 mentioned about decent wage since 1997 to 2021. It has been 24 years now. The government sector has operated in Cambodia, but workers in this sector have started from 30 to 164 US dollar per month, compared with other private companies. I know that from our observation, producers in the government sector are important, but trade unions have played an important role to demand for increase in decent wage. Over 24 years, the increase of wage is to only 164 per year. And up to now, in the first quarter of 2019, there are up to 5,000 trade unions registered officially with the government. And we have 4,600 local trade unions, grassroots trade unions. However, these play important role in demanding for benefits and increase in wage for our workers. However, they are not united. They are not working together. They are fragmented. They are not representing workers in addressing workers' issues. So we want those trade unions to discuss and consult workers in their own sector before demanding for benefits or workers' rights. We want them to discuss internally. What we want is that women's issues are addressed. We know that we want to see women issues are addressed at the workplace and in their life. But we want, even though the production has increased, we want the government to and employers to think about the producers' benefits and protection. While these benefits and protection are limited. Thank you very much.
We are running out of time and from our organizer. So I'd like to provide a very, very short synthesis of what we have discussed. We have a great panel discussion. So we discussed about this systemic crisis, this economic inequality, where the backbones of the society, economic, like migrant workers from formal and informal sector continues to face a lot of exploitation, discrimination, violations against their rights, and they don't access to any protection from the state and also from the receiver state as well. And we see the crisis, emerging crisis of climate change, which is not a standalone issue, which has been connected very well by Dr. Supat of how it is important to tackle climate change. One, we want to build one ASEAN health. We have also discussed about what migrant workers really want for the new ASEAN or Redesigning ASEAN for everyone, which is include the decent worker right be respected. And also we are trying to discuss about the roles of youth in tackling climate change, but also in holding governments accountable and also response to their commitment and fulfillment of those law and regulation that have been adopted and signed on. So I like to end it here, and I apologize that we don't have much time for our panelists to interact for the last moment. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Supat, Sreymom, and also Santiago for your great contribution to this discussion. I hand it over to the MCs. Thank you, everyone. All the best.
Thank you so much, Kun Sophia, for your great moderation. And thank you as well for the panelists for sharing your time and experience with us. So audience, please don't change your channel because our next panel is coming shortly.
Wow.